Some may call it functional alcoholism, but if you know anything about Ben, he's got vision with precision, microphones and a tinkle of derision. You're about to hear what beer can be. It's time for Barley and Me.
Welcome to Barley Me. I'm your host, Ben Rice. Stop it! We haven't even gotten to you yet. I made it 2 seconds. 2 seconds. That's like all time.
Keep a good woman down.
So proud of that
record. Back into radio voice. Back into radio voice. Back to one. Welcome to Barley and Me. I'm your host, Ben Rice. This is episode 135. We're here today in our own homes because COVID-19's still a thing. Our special guest today, we've got from the Oldest Profession podcast, Kaytlin Bailey.
Thank you so much for having me.
You've already met her. You already love her.
I'm here. I'm excited. I don't have beer. I feel bad. I forgot I get to stay in my home. I forgot. I've been living out in the woods since March. It's 40 minutes away to beer and it's just Bud Light. And so I'm sorry, but I'm here and I'm very excited to be here, but I don't have beer. And I wanted to disclose that immediately because I feel guilty about it. I think it's important to start there.
Thank you. Now,
would you like me to do double duty for you?
Yes, please. Thank you so much, Tara.
Okay,
yeah,
I was going to ask.
Oh, I'm sorry, Ben. You want to do your introduction.
Yes,
I get it.
Please.
Yeah.
If you'd be
your
so
radio
kind,
voice. No. I mean, whatever. No, this is your show. Do whatever you want, Ben.
Well, all I was going to say is we need a second opinion on whether or not we can allow you on the podcast. I know I have my opinion, but we have another guest, beer journalist Tara Nurin, author of the upcoming book "Don't Worry, Darling, You Didn't Burn the Beer."
Hi, that's my radio voice. It's sexy. Do you like it?
I love it.
Hi.
So I'm going to pass to you. How do you feel about Kaytlin remaining on this podcast, despite the fact that she's not drinking a beer, a thing that has happened in the past? Just so we're clear.
The little bit that I've interacted with Kaytlin, I like her very much. She's cool. I bet she has a lot to say, and she gave a really good justification for not having beer. So I vote we let her stay on the island.
Okay. Look, I do it to a vote every time, and so far, you're the first one to be allowed back. No, I'm kidding. We never put it to a vote, and I only did it for fun. You're absolutely allowed here. Thank you both for being here. I really appreciate it. I'm so excited to have this conversation. I have no idea where it's going to go.
Me either.
Because your worlds collide and are separate, and it's very fun, and a lot is going on. I'll just say, before we get started, I am drinking a beer. I'm going to be drinking a fresh Pils of LA from Common Space Brewing in Los Angeles. It is National Lager Day, so let's start with a lager on that one. Haven't had it before, no idea what to expect other than the idea of what a Pilsner is. Hopefully it's nice and grassy and sweet.
Let's hope.
Anyway,
what
are you drinking, Tara, is what I meant the whole time.
I have to be honest, I'm cleaning up a bit. I have several beers in front of me, which is a good or a bad thing. We'll see at the end of the hour. I just came off leading 2 beer tasting classes in a row, virtual, corporate. One was a chocolate pairing, one was a cheese pairing, and I had to open 6 beers, and I have all of them left over. So currently I then am sipping on a Stone Arrogant Bastard, controversially named and identified beer, but gargoyles all around, which is cool because we're getting into medieval history. So wild.
Yeah.
Nice. I'll take that as a go. Let's work together on a project in the future called Friday Night Flights. Let's do this. But anyway, Tara, you just put out a new article today. What else do you have going on besides that and including that?
So my article today was for an international website called Spirits Hunters. Thanks for asking. Basically, I was given the assignment to analyze the global situation as it comes to shutting down bars in light of COVID as contrasted with public transportation, and do it in 500 words.
Easy.
So, it was kind of cool what I found out, and I won't give away, like, I won't spoiler alert it or anything, but I was really surprised at how little data has been collected worldwide on where spreads are coming from. And I came to some interesting conclusions about beer and looked into the idea of speakeasies, which we'll probably talk about in this podcast, as part of prohibition and women. The bigger project, though, is I do have my first book coming out next September 2021, and it is the first history of women in beer, starting 200,000 years ago.
Yes. When we were in charge.
Pre-civilization. God, the things I've come across from researching this are incredible. Like how consistent misogyny is over and over and over, and how it looks the same.
Yeah.
Thousands of years and thousands of miles apart. And I'm super excited to dive into that with the two of you guys. And so, I mean, the theme, the overall angle of the book is when in almost every civilization, throughout time, throughout space, women have been the brewers of beer, because generally it was drunk almost like water. Super common. And then generally, as soon as it became profitable, not always, usually either capitalism, religion, or economic or politics got in the way.
I was going to say violence.
Yeah, I also.
And that gets to the heart of why we're here today talking with Kaytlin.
Yeah, absolutely. So, very similar. You see that pattern. I'm confident that you see that pattern over and over again within brewing, which is fascinating. But you see that pattern over and over again with everything from coding to, just all of it. It's amazing to me how many, like the written word, so many different, many technological innovations that created the foundations of civilization, right? The domestication of plants and animals happened in women's quarters, right? It's women that are caring for domesticated animals. It's women who are cultivating, agriculture as gathering out and seeding and finding what works and what doesn't. And so the foundations of civilization are really built on women's labor, which we then spend the next 6,000 years degrading and pretending doesn't exist.
Well, and that's so true. I mean, like from almost the very beginning, women's work what we think of as women's work today was women's work then. What surprises people is that brewing beer was women's work because you did it in the kitchen. It was part of your cooking because, as sort of the conventional wisdom goes, drinking beer was safer than drinking the contaminated water in a lot of places. And so the family drank beer, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, even the babies, low alcohol beer. So women, like I said, as part of the kitchen chores, would brew beer, right? And then as it became more profitable, became part of the public sphere more and more, then, all these different forces degraded women into lower and lower positions, took them out of brewing.
And there's that word public, right? Public and power, right? And I think that is, that's a big theme of what I cover, right? So you look at the prism of history through beer, and I look at the prism of history through sex workers. And so I think it's fascinating that this pushing women out of the guilds, out of the breweries, and out of the public space is all wrapped up in this fear of women that I think we're going to, get into it when we talk about medieval history and that transition into sort of Judeo-Christian theology away from fertility goddesses and the temples of Ishtar and Babylon into, the Roman Empire, right? The most I want to say patronizing. That's it.
Patriarchal.
The most patriarchal civilization in all of human history. Right. Yeah. Very. Yeah. Shape shifts into the Holy Roman Empire and the Catholic Church, which spends like its first 1,000 years denigrating women, right? Lilith, the succubus, the story of Eve, the rewriting of our origin narrative, right? Like the story of Genesis with Adam being created first and Eve being created from the rib is the first origin story in all of human history that doesn't feature a womb. It's like whatever. So yeah, I'm excited to get into this shit with you. Let's do this.
Yeah.
Me too. And I will say before we toss it back to Ben to steer us if you would like to.
I don't
think that's a great idea.
I first learned really what Lilith was about very recently in researching this book, and I was horrified at what history had done to her.
Holy shit, yes.
Holy shit, yes. I guess we should talk about that at some point in the hour.
Yeah, I mean, we can get into it, or you could listen to my 3-part series on her, which we are releasing right now. Yeah, the oldest profession. She's the old pro that we did a deep dive into in December because it was December and I wanted to do something from the Bible. It took a weird turn. She's so witches and stuff, but it was amazing. But yeah, do we want to do a quick Cliff Notes first?
Let's do a quick recap, and then if you want to hear more, go check out the Oldest Profession podcast.
Absolutely.
Come back to this or don't, whatever.
So yeah, Lilith comes from this sort of older world of goddesses, right? And so she's conceived of as being Adam's first wife, or like the first Eve. The myth origin is that they were created at the same time, but Lilith has this like whole pre-Garden of Eden backstory, as does Adam, right? So like Adam is like God's boy in heaven. He's just like, yes, sir, ain't him. And then Lilith is this fucking chaos fertility goddess from like the other world where like bloody bitches were in charge. And so they both they're both created at the same time at the Garden of Eden. And Lilith is like both Adam's mother and twin sister. And there's one version of the myth that I love a lot, and I think it says a lot about misogyny, where Adam got to watch Lilith being created at the same time as him in the Garden of Eden, and there was just too much blood and sinew and muscly tissue, and so then he couldn't see her as a sexy person anymore, and that was the original problem. But the problem that gets God upset is that Lilith wanted to be on top during sex. Lilith wanted to come also. She wanted some clit action in the sex situation happening in the Garden of Eden. And Adam didn't want to be topped. Adam wanted to be in charge, in part because he couldn't keep it up, continuing to focus on Lilith's sinewy blood bones or whatever that messy creation process was, because men are cowards. So he can't get it up unless he's on top. Lilith won't consent to sex if she's being topped, and so she leaves to go fuck demons or whatever. And then both God and Adam are it's so weird that Lilith wants to be on top. And Lilith is I've got this great house by the Red Sea. I'm fucking demons. Things are chill. So God sends these 2 angels and is Lilith, you should go back to the Garden of Eden. And she's why? And they're that's a really good point. But since you won't go back, you're going to be cursed with having babies that all die, and also you have this new lust for killing babies, and that's your new mission. And Lilith is why do we always have to combine female pleasure with baby murder? Why are those associated ever, but also always? So yes. Lilith is fine, I'd rather kill babies and give birth to dead babies than have sex with that dumb dude again. So she does that, and then the whole of human history is women are a problem. And I think that's the Cliff Notes version.
I'm not sure I can top. God, I've already forgotten some of those awesome expressions you just used. Jumping off from that is, from what I understand, is that the story of Lilith sort of devolved. She devolved over time. When she first came into human consciousness. She was this independent chick, right?
Yeah.
And then, like, I don't know, 1,000 years later or whatever, she was fucking demons.
Yeah.
And what I ever knew of Lilith before now was that she was this sort of like demonic creature. And that is how the story of women evolves, and they continue to get sort of more marginalized, more associated with demons, more associated with devil worship. And that is how they more and more become viewed with suspicion. And then if you go from Lilith, who was the wife of Adam? We all know about Eve. Oh, she was created from his body.
Right. Like his daughter, but not in a creepy way. Well, actually, it's super creepy. Right.
So, like, she couldn't have existed without the man. Yep. And here we are.
And then in some versions of the story, it's actually Lilith who tempts Eve at, like, that Lilith is the snake, that she sort of embodies that and she is the one that sort of leads Eve to knowledge, right? Which is like the tree of knowledge. And I think that's another really interesting point, that it's like, what's really dangerous is a woman that knows her shit. That is an existential threat to the patriarchy, and we have to combat it at all points. And to your point, what's so fascinating about the story of Lilith is that you're absolutely right. She shapeshifts over time, sort of embodying this, the fear of the dark and powerful feminine. So Lilith, like, ages in a way that, like, other stories don't. So she sort of starts off as this, like, sex pot, right, in the early Christian church, and this temptress, right? And then in the early, later, when you get in sort of the, like, after Rome falls and it's just like chaos for like 1,000 years, nobody's really got their shit together yet. She's a temptress, but she becomes a succubus, which is another responsible for wet dreams, and also for killing newborn infants, right? That's you know, we got to combine those
classic Madonna horror complex things.
Exactly. Yeah. But right around the time that the Catholic Church decides that their priests are not allowed to marry, not because their priests are not allowed to fuck, but because we gotta stop giving church property away. We gotta stop creating legitimate heirs, these fucking whores. I mean, wives, we gotta turn them into whores. That way they can't inherit. So that, right around when that happens, Lilith, like, skyrockets in the medieval consciousness. The idea of succubuses and the idea of the dark and demonic feminine, she becomes this kind of grotesque rapist. And then by the time you get to the Enlightenment, by the time you get to the beginnings of science, right, in the like 15, 16, 1700s, it's a slow, you know, it's before Twitter, so, like, news does not move fast. But she develops into this crone and becomes very, very much associated with the witch iconography, which I think brings us back to brewers and this fear of the feminine and what we have done to the stories of women. But yeah, Lilith is fascinating. I think she's foundational, and I want you guys to listen to my podcast about it.
Yeah.
Well, this leads to many different points that we could make in layers simultaneously. One is that if you look at, let's say, the Epic of Gilgamesh, for instance, which is considered to be the first real literature, written literature, the female characters in there are, one is an alewife, which means she's running the bar. One is a temptress and basically uses beer to lure the protagonist away from his friends. And these are manipulative types of women. No coincidence they're associated with beer. Again, remember, we have to remember that throughout time, women were the brewsters. Brewster is a female version of a brewer, for the most part. So what we see in literature and folklore and even like kid stories and religious paintings that on church walls that still exist is demonization of women who are brewing. So, like I said, Epic of Gilgamesh, the one of the lead female characters leads him away from his friends and leads him sort of astray.
Sorry,
right?
Is this the Ishtar, right? This is like Ishtar or the,
Nope,
right.
Exactly.
Yes. The original whore of Babylon.
Yeah. And then what we also see around that time are depictions of alewives that are disgusting. I mean, we'll leave religion out of it and the church paintings for a moment, but there are, so many writings where the descriptions of alewives, they're fat, they're old, they have big crooked noses, they snot into the beer, they're cheaters in every aspect of selling beer. They water down the beer, they overcharge, they run these taverns of filth. Mm-hmm. Their patrons consist of women who are equally gross, like sort of slinking in secretly into their taverns. And, they let animals do disgusting things into their beer. Like all the most extreme gross things you can think about that somebody could do to your drink, these women in medieval literature are doing. So why does that happen? I mean, that's not an accident. That is a very intentional attempt to denigrate women and denigrate alewives at a time when, the forces that be didn't really want people patronizing taverns anymore. Mm-hmm. So they take women who were running the taverns and turn them into these disgusting creatures. So why would you want to go to a tavern if you were a normal person? And why would you want to be an alewife if you were a normal person? I mean, there's like some crossover with anti-Semitism here too, but that's a whole podcast probably. And then you see more directly in the Catholic Church, not that the Protestants are spared, they've got their own issues, but throughout the ages in the Catholic Church, you start to see brewsters having associations with demons, right? And there are these paintings and there are these stories of, association with the devil, sex with demons all over the place. And, we're talking about ancient history here. Not everything is necessarily 100% clear, but it is believed by historians that these stories are describing and depicting women with beer who are cheating their customers. Once again, you see this theme of beer-related women cheating their customers. And then also, by the way, having sex with demons.
Yep.
And
just like Lilith.
Through time, it gets more and more and more explicit, right?
Yeah.
This is how you control the message. That's my point. That's controlling the message.
No, it's amazing to me. And I'm so glad that you brought up the sort of forces that be and the powerful trying to dissuade the message from taverns, because taverns, much like brothels, are spaces where people can gather. And that is what social movements and social unrest is made out of. So you look at the peasants' revolt, you look at the panic of landowners during the very messy transition from feudalism into wage capitalism. It is a huge, sort of power grab essentially from peasants and landowners and people that had interconnected communities where these brewsters, I'm sorry, that's a new word for me and I love it. These brewsters were running shit. If you go to any small town in America, it's 6 old ladies that are just running shit. That's the natural way of the world, is an auntie-led culture. And that's the way that it was in the medieval period. It's people lived there for generations. As you said, there's a lot of socialization around the making, the production, and the consumption of all the kinds of foods and beverages, including, of course, beer. But that demonization of public gathering spaces and women who have social power. One of my favorite books on the subject, Caliban, I'm going to pronounce it wrong. Caliban and the Witch is a fantastic history of the relationship between misogyny and disenfranchising the peasant or serf class in feudal culture. Because when you disempower the women in communities, it's easier to take that property. And so you see this as kind of like over the course of hundreds, if not 1,000 years, this sort of primrose path of, yes, first it's a reputational hit, right? Then, women can't marry priests anymore. So, anyone who is giving birth to, I want to say minister, but that's Protestantism, that's later. A priest's son, is, extramaritally may as well be a whore. The Catholic Church creates this whole code, actually, that I think is fascinating, where they basically are like, okay, we can't let our priests marry anymore because like we literally can't afford it. And, but we gotta stop them from like raping the local women because that's also eroding our like trust in the community. We can't have like every priest in the Catholic Church just like, deflowering, the local girls. So instead, if you've had sex before marriage, you're as a woman, or you've been raped or something, then you're like definitely going to hell. But the difference between like one dick and 1,000 dicks doesn't matter. So once you've been ruined, it's all the same to God. So you may as well sell your pussy, which isn't nearly as, and also seeing a prostitute or paying, an already ruined woman for sex, not nearly so bad a sin as raping or ruining, a virgin or a proper woman in the community. So as an effort to the medieval period has like a real roving band of drunken rapists problem during a period of time, like the civil disorder sort of defalls, and it's actually a problem with the guilds because they only allowed masters to marry, and so the guild masters were getting like really protective, and they cornered the market because only masters could like charge the high rates, and also so you had all of these disaffected journeymen in their like 30s and 40s that should have become masters but weren't because money, and so they weren't able to marry. You see a huge rise here in the Magdalene houses and also the nunneries. And there's a fun thing where like some nunneries are brothels, and the Catholic Church is actually the largest brothel owner in Europe for a period of 400 years because of all of this banana pants shit. But I lost my train of thought, but it was wrapping up and it was going someplace real good. Let me see if I can. Banana pants. Yeah. So, well, that's not true. I say that all the time. So because the drunken bands of roving rapists were causing real social disorder. So they were like, okay, first, we got to make brothels more available. We got to clamp down on this. And then eventually they get to the Crusades. But I love this idea that like unmarried men set shit on fire and cause social havoc, and like unmarried women, whether they're having sex for money or are married to Jesus, are mostly just busy making beautiful tapestries. Like that is what happens.
Well, you need something to burn. So
right.
During all the
right.
So there are like 50,000 directions I can take this.
Yeah.
I think I'm gonna pick up on the guilds. And the formation of capitalism, right?
Perfect.
So what this is about when it comes to the guilds and the formation of capitalism, and we're talking about Europe here over the span of, I don't know, we'll just say Middle Ages, is that there was so much competition and so much brutality in civilization. I mean, people literally killing their own children like it was nothing because they couldn't afford to keep them.
Well, I mean, this is before birth control. So like, I mean, that makes a little bit more sense.
Okay.
Sure. All right.
I don't know about that. That's fine. I'll defer to you. Kill or be killed. When it comes to the guilds and the formation of capitalism is I think sort of like the way to understand this. So how could you make somebody more vulnerable and sort of cut out the most vulnerable in society so that you could survive. So when it comes to beer, for example, and beer guilds were very different depending on like where you were in Europe, what sort of time period it was. But to generalize a minute, at first, if you were a woman and you were a brewster brewing out of your house and then selling your excess to the public, you could be in a guild. And then you could only be in a guild if your husband was also brewing with you and he died. Okay, so you're a widow, you were attached to a man,
Yep.
He died.
So he could get the credit.
Exactly, right. And then, like, things got more tense, more competitive, and then they started cutting out rights that females could have in the guilds. So one of the things that they cut out after a bit was you couldn't have an apprentice anymore if you were a woman. Well, if you couldn't have an apprentice anymore as a brewer, like, I keep using the word disenfranchised, but like you lose access to what was becoming a more professionalized career, right? And then you could only keep the clients or keep like your accounts that you had that were existing while your husband was alive, but like once sort of they ended and moved on, you couldn't pick up new accounts to move on or new apprentices. So the guilds were over time decreasing and decreasing and decreasing the ability that women had to hold on to this meager lifeline that had been brewing, which it gets a little confusing because yes, women were the brewers for the most part, but women didn't have any rights. They couldn't own property. They couldn't sign contracts. So their husband had to be the one who was like the face, the title of the brewery, right? And so, yeah, like, and then only widows. Well, I might have said that before, but like in some cases, nobody else but a widow could have guild membership. And then the women become more and more and more vulnerable, more and more and more cut out. And to your, area of interest, Kaytlin, it got to the point, well, then in some cases you couldn't be a brewster anymore. So you became a seamstress, right? Which was, or like you sewed buttons. And that was very, very, very menial work. I mean, brewing was very menial work, but then you were kicked down to sort of more menial work. And then you weren't allowed to be a seamstress anymore. And then you had no power whatsoever. And God forbid you were an unmarried woman because you were the most vulnerable in society. And some places would literally kick you out. They would banish you from the village. If you were an unmarried woman, you weren't allowed to rent a place to live. Like I said, in more extreme cases, you were banished. And then you had nothing. You were a stranger in a strange land, right? What are you going to do to literally survive? You've got two options. You become a nun, if that's feasible where you are, or you become a prostitute.
Which we heard was the same thing sometimes.
The Protestants thought so, and that's why they sort of demolished I want to say covens.
the nunnery coven. No, you put it in my head. The nunneries. We'll call it the convents. That's what you mean.
There we go. Covens.
Yeah, the convicted convents. Wait. Okay.
So what you see, I mean, I'm taking a long time to say it, but what you see is this like de-evolution of women's stature in society so that they become so cut off, so desperate that they can really only become sex workers, and then sex work becomes criminalized.
Two things. I want to jump in and I want to piggyback on what you said and say that it is so interesting to me that the story that we tell about brewsters and the story that we tell about Lilith and the succubus and the story that we tell about public women are all on this same track, right?
Always.
And so these trends very much kind of what's it like a feedback loop. It becomes a feedback loop of this this bad reputation sort of default, that brewsters are gross tricksters becomes this idea that you shouldn't trust them, becomes justification for the removal of their power, which of course, what happens when you remove somebody's power? They become more desperate. Desperate will do desperate things. So probably if you weren't cheating your customers before, now you definitely are, because your profit margins have been like fucking, yeah. So it's like the creation of the circumstances that end up making the lie true. And I think that is true for brewsters, and it's certainly true for sex workers. And I love and respect you, and I think that your work is awesome, but I do want to challenge you on your point that only the most desperate would ever engage in any kind of sex work. And I will tell you that there have always been all stratas of sex work.
There.
Right? Yes,
I
thank
didn't
you.
mean to imply that.
No, it's fine. I get it. I just want to get in there and check, because it's my job. But yeah, like there have always been all kinds of sex workers, and yes, there were absolutely there were people driven to all kinds of exploitative situations, including deeply exploitative sexual relations, because they were not able to get their survival needs met, and we see this pattern over and over again. And I think it's one of those, it's like the more you learn you got to go through all 7 stages of grief, right? Like the angrier you get, and then like the tireder you get, and then like it's a lot. But I want to, do you want to talk about the Magdalene houses? Or do you want to jump forward to, Prohibition, and the progressive era here in the U.S. Because that's another. Oh, I'm sorry, Ben. This is your podcast.
It's the same story.
What do you think we should talk about?
It's the same story from the beginning. Everything is the same story, just retold over and over again. If we're gonna bring it into the modern era, I gotta say, you're talking about these people devolving, losing their ability to finance themselves, and it's the glory of capitalism that allows you to criminalize being poor without saying you're criminalizing being poor. It's nothing changes.
In the medieval era, they criminalized poor. It was literally,
Oh, sorry, cut out on my end on that. Sorry.
I just want to throw in, and this doesn't necessarily have to do with sex work, but when it comes to beer and women, the most striking example of what's old is new again is colonial brewsters. The story of women brewing in colonial America is like exactly the same as the story of sort of like early Renaissance English brewsters. And then if you want to look back, we can look at, Mesopotamian civilization, but I'll stop there. It's just like it leaves me speechless, and I'm so rarely speechless. So, okay, Prohibition, let's go. Go ahead.
So yes, speaking of the colonial period in the U.S., I think it's important. Sex workers we've always been shapeshifters, and we've always been at the front lines, right? Because of our freedom of movement, right? Because we are less tethered, because of misogyny and whorephobia, whatnot. Like we often leave our families of origin, or we're able to leave our husbands, or we're able to move independently. And specifically in the U.S., the colonial period, we absolutely have examples of prostitution, but as well, pushed genocidally into the West, sex workers become essentially camp followers, because a lot of these early settlements were essentially work camps, right? These are mining towns, the gold rush, lumber camps, but you're looking at like a 70-to-1 male ratio, which the only other place they see are theaters of war, right? Where you have lots of soldiers gathered. So the economic incentives and the lack of prohibition create the economic circumstances in the West where madam owners and sex workers and women become some of the largest landowners in the West. Like Colorado gave women the right to vote decades before women on the East Coast won. And it's because sex workers and female entrepreneurs had real economic power out in the West. And it's not until the progressive era in the 1910s and 19 where we criminalize, abortion, alcohol, and prostitution all at the same time. We shutter the brothels. We push it further underground. And because of prohibition, sex work and alcohol establishments become intertwined again, because what you would have is people run, bar top becomes a business model, everywhere.
Well, that is such a really concise, explanation of why women out West did get more suffrage, more power politically than women in the rest of the country. The first woman in Congress was from Wyoming. And you see that a lot in Western states. And then to skip ahead to Prohibition, what you're saying reminds me of this concept of wine rooms. So, before Prohibition, generally taverns, as far as like my perspective, my research goes, they tended to be on the seedier side, crowds of men, whatever. And then they might then only, right? And then they would have these back rooms separated by curtains or, maybe a temporary wall with a separate entrance that were where the women could go and drink. And sometimes it was quote unquote respectable women, and sometimes it wasn't. But point is, there were times when the law would come in and shut these wine rooms down and say they were breeding grounds for prostitution, and so they are no longer allowed to exist. And here again, you see sort of the crossover between alcohol, women, and sex. Mm-hmm. And here again, we see, like so many times before it, when, there's sort of a power vacuum or a power grab, women are reduced, and I'm sorry, maybe Kaytlin, reduced is the wrong word. Women are identified basically as like sex crazed beings, and then that sort of like offend the moral order, right?
Oh,
and
yeah.
Maybe they're just single women who throughout time immemorial, like I said, it's single women who are subject to sort of the most, the most restrictive rules, and it's single women who are the most threatening, as you were saying before.
Yeah, and it really comes to a head during World War I in the U.S., right? 1917, America joins, enters World War I, and that's the same year that we passed the American Plan, which was sold to the American people as a necessary public health measure to protect our soldiers from infection. Criminalized not just prostitution, which we did back in 1910 and then, more in like 1912. It happens different times at different places. 1917 in San Francisco, we shut the brothels down. But at that time, we criminalized promiscuity, not prostitution. Yep. Promiscuity, which empowered local law enforcement and federal agents to pick up women walking alone or making the wrong kind of eye contact with a cop, force them into an STI test, but it's like 1917, so it's just like some chauvinistic doctor that's like, your pussy looks slutty, but they all look that way. But they're gathering women, they're forcing them in lock hospitals, and it's this massive PR campaign. Like, if you look back at posters of World War I, it's like, she may look clean, but she's not. Like, be fair, loose lips, sink ships. It's like, women are the most dangerous agents in a society. And like, I can't overstress this enough. I'm sorry, I'm losing my train of thought. But like, yes to the characterization of single women as like the most urgent problem. And I think that like brewsters and workers and women across the board have been stymied by that sticky story.
And I think to sort of wrap it all up, if we haven't made this point sort of succinctly enough, clearly enough, it's a matter of power, you know? If one feels like they need to consolidate power or they are losing power, you basically sort of desperately look around and see who you can cast off and denigrate and basically say, you're fucking a demon, you're a witch. And not to open the witchcraft conversation, but
it's just right there.
That's what it's about. Like, why women? Why are we saying, oh, you know, women are being attacked? It's because throughout been the ones who have held the power and therefore have been able to decide who doesn't have power and who gets blamed and who gets cut out when men need to ensure that their power stays intact.
Which is bananas to me, because it's like the whole thing seems to be like, ew, women are slimy. And it's like, you know, we forbid beer. I lost my train of thought again. But like, yes, I'm issues, and it's a disgusting and pernicious myth that any woman that becomes good at a craft or stands independent on her own runs the risk of brushing up against these old stories about how dangerous, smart, independent women are.
Yeah.
And you got to watch yourself, or you might get burned alive.
Yeah.
Because nothing scares a man like a smart, intelligent, driven woman.
Yeah.
I want to get this joke in there because I almost did it. I was like, Donald Trump is like a caricature of like stupid dude ideas, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, you looking at it, that man has never come. It's like a kind of dude that if he ever accidentally made a woman wet, he'd be like, ew, slimy. And like, that's the patriarchy.
And I'm noticing another thing that we're kind of avoiding on this topic, as we discussed how everything's the same all the time, no matter how much time passes. We are missing that women keep coming back and rising to the top again.
Yeah.
To the point that men would be like, hey, get back there.
Well, that's also the point of my book. Like, okay, maybe one of the points, many points of the book. You know, I sort of tell this whole background story about what has happened around the world through history. And, late 1970s, craft beer starts, and there's a woman from the very beginning. And here we are. And I think at this point, I hope I'm not wrong, we're not going away.
Yeah.
Well, I certainly hope that's true too. And I think it's really important for brewsters and for feminists and for women in public to stand in solidarity with sex workers and recognize that the misogyny that criminalizes the oldest profession is the pointy end of the spear that has been putting us back in the home for early thousands of years. And I look around and I'm nervous, right? I look at Sesta Frost, I look at the Earn It Act, I look at the restaurant on the Upper East Side that will no longer serve single women at the bar if they don't want sex workers. I look around at the moral panic that we're currently in. You know, I feel like I'm standing here trying to change the story about sex workers, but I feel like I am in many ways standing for all public women to participate actively in public life and to reject the fear that they might be mistaken for somebody that has sex for pleasure.
I mean, I was just going to say, like, despite the thousands of more hours we could talk about this, like, I feel like that's a good place to end for now.
Yeah. I mean, I think now more than ever, it's important to talk about the history of beer on the whole scale. Especially with the fact that a lot of these industries may be like even the restaurants that may or may not serve single women at the bar are in danger. All these things are in danger right now. And I think it's a very important time to capture those stories and get them out there to people so that we can, if it goes away, there's a documentation of it. So I want to thank you guys for having this conversation. Entirely sorry for saying you guys. I just realized I'm just fucking ingrained in
I feel misgendered. You're canceled.
I don't mind you guys, but my friends,
you guys upsets me.
Some women don't like it.
I say it because Kaytlin, you and I both do stand up. I say it to the crowd. I'm like, you need to stop saying this so much, and I say it like 5 times a set. I'm like, stop, and I like can't. Get out of it. I'm fine
with the guys. It's the yous that bother me. It's really? a word. Yeah, use is wrong. It's I'm from the South.
Obnoxious.
Use is obnoxious. Use guys.
Oh, yeah, no, I say you guys, please.
Y'all
please.
Is the proper, right. Is the proper.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Y'all is the
all
best.
y'all.
I live in New Jersey, and I'll agree with that.
Y'all is
Thank
the
you.
best. I should change to y'all.
Yeah.
But
how are y'all doing? It's gender neutral. It's inclusive. It'll get you out of parking tickets.
Yeah. It's both second person and third person. So if you want to feel familiar, you can feel familiar. If you want to feel like you don't know each other, you can do that too. Very inviting. But anyway, yeah, I think this has been a logical stop point, as mentioned. I've really enjoyed this conversation. I'm glad I wasn't a part of it. Great job in keeping me out of it, as you should have done. So thank you. But before we go, we've got to talk about where people can find out more, because there's I have notes of things I was
oh my God, there's so much more.
There's so much more. So where can people find you guys? God damn it. Where can people find y'all on the internet if they want to learn more?
So I'll start.
Thank you,
my website is my name, Tara Nurin. Everyone ready? You have your pen?
Get your pens. Get your pencils. Your favorite writing utensils.
I teach a beer class to university students. So ready? TaraNurin.com. And that is basically how you can find me on all the social media platforms. Facebook, Twitter. I don't do the ones that I'm really too old for. Like I would creep people out if I were on like Snapchat and stuff. I don't do that, but I think I'm on Instagram. I am on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook as myself, Tara Nurin.
Thank you, Tara.
One of these days you're going to lose a bet and get on TikTok. I can feel it.
My 53-year-old boyfriend starts every sentence now with like, I'm on TikTok now. I'm like, oh my God, you creeper, why? Oh my God.
I'm on TikTok now and we're out of groceries.
That's funny. Oh man, that's great. So yeah, my name is Kaytlin Bailey. I'm a sex worker, rights advocate, stand-up comic, and writer. I also have a website, that is also my name, KaytlinBailey.com. But what I am, really pushing right now is the Oldest Profession podcast. We are an advocacy organization. We're a podcast. We are funding a 5-city art build to celebrate, the anniversary of the first sex worker-led protest in this country. And you can check us out at the oldestprofessionpodcast.com and across social media platforms at Old Pro Podcast. And also, like Tara, when I say all social media platforms, I only mean YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Same. And I've listened to a bunch of the podcasts. It's funny. It's informative. It flies by. And I love the fact that you take weeks and episodes to go through these people. I love it.
Thank you.
So keep doing it. And for Barley and Me, you can follow Barley Me across social media using those same parameters as have previously been laid out. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, at Barley and Me Pod. Email questions, comments, concerns to barleymepodcast@gmail.com. Don't forget to check out my chugs for charity. This week I'm chugging a Common Space beer, raising money for Campaign Zero, which helps to end no-knock police work and police violence. So anyway, great episode. Thank you guys. God damn it.
What?
So I'm from like the north, we'll say. I've lived Maine to Alaska, north. And one time we moved to the Midwest and in the Minnesota type area. And so they have those long O's, right? You know, like the North Dakota thing, right? And I didn't want to have that sound. So what I would do when I'd catch myself was literally punch myself in the face. So I might have to do that with you guys. I think I'm going to start punching myself in the face when I say it. So I stop.
Personally, I think that you should just end the podcast with you saying "use guys" and then "God damn it" really loud, because that was the funniest thing.
Yes, that's good.
Well, I have my outro phrase, so.
Oh, let's hear your outro phrase. Go.
All right. Okay. Yeah.
So this has been episode 135 of Barley and Me with Kaytlin Bailey. God, now I'm in my head.
God damn it!
I'm sorry.
It's been. Hi, I'm a trained. I have no training. All right. This has been episode 135 of Barley and Me. I'm your host, Ben Rice. This has been our guests, Kaytlin Bailey from the Oldest Profession podcast and beer journalist Tara Nurin. Thanks so much for listening. Stay home safe. Used to be get home safe, but, nobody's driving.
You nailed it.
Yeah, that's good. You got use guys.